Envy, clarified in the light of the Grail Message. A guide to recognition, liberation, and lawful living. Foreword. Why envy must be clarified today. Among the many inner poisons silently shaping human destiny, envy remains one of the least examined and most excused. It hides behind ambition, disguises itself as motivation, and often parades as a harmless comparison. Yet envy is not harmless. It is a corrosive force that eats quietly into clarity, peace, and lawful development. Modern humanity lives in an age of relentless comparison. Lives are measured publicly, success is displayed constantly, and worth is increasingly defined by visibility rather than inner substance. In such an environment, envy is no longer recognized as a danger, it is normalized, rationalized, and even encouraged. This normalization has dulled conscience and distorted judgment, making it difficult for individuals to recognize envy within themselves, even when its consequences are clearly felt. To clarify envy today is therefore not a moral exercise, but a necessary act of illumination. Without clarity, humanity continues to struggle against invisible causes, attempting to treat symptoms while the true inner disorder remains untouched. The Grail Message offers a perspective that cuts through emotional justification and social conditioning, revealing envy for what it truly is, a state of inner resistance against the lawful order of life. The silent corrosive of the soul. Envy rarely announces itself openly. It works quietly, often beneath conscious awareness. Unlike anger or hatred, which may erupt visibly, envy seeps slowly into thought, coloring perception and judgment over time. It weakens inner stability, drains joy, and hardens the heart without dramatic signs. Its corrosive nature lies in its inward direction. While it appears to focus on others, envy actually turns the human being against himself. It undermines self-respect, distorts self-assessment, and blocks gratitude. Over time, it erodes the natural capacity to rejoice in life, replacing it with constant comparison and dissatisfaction. Because envy operates subtly, many do not recognize its presence until relationships sour, motivation collapses, or inner peace becomes unattainable. Even then, it is often misdiagnosed as depression, injustice, or bad fortune. The Grail Message reveals that envy is not merely an emotional reaction, but a spiritual condition with lawful consequences. Left unrecognized, it steadily corrodes the soul's connection to clarity and order. From social normalization to lawful recognition. One of the greatest dangers of envy today is its social acceptance. Competition is praised, rivalry is encouraged, and comparison is presented as a natural driver of progress. In such an atmosphere, envy is no longer seen as a warning signal but as a normal emotional response to life. This social normalization prevents recognition. When an inner disorder is collectively approved, individuals lose the inner courage to question it. Envy becomes justified by circumstance. Anyone would feel this way, or, it's only human. Such reasoning silences conscience and prevents growth. Lawful recognition, however, does not depend on social consensus. The laws of creation work independently of human opinion. Whether envy is praised, excused, or condemned makes no difference to its effects. The Grail Message redirects attention away from social judgment toward inner reality, calling each individual to soberly observe the consequences of envy within himself and in his life. The purpose of this work. This work does not aim to condemn, shame, or moralize. Its purpose is clarification. Only what is clearly recognized can be corrected. Only what is understood can be released. The aim is threefold. To expose envy as it truly is, stripped of emotional justification and social disguise. To show how envy operates in accordance with the laws of creation, producing lawful consequences. To offer a clear, practical path toward inner freedom through recognition, responsibility, and alignment. This book is written for those who sense that something within them resists peace, despite external success or moral effort. It is for earnest seekers who wish to understand themselves honestly and step out of repetitive inner conflict. It is also an eye-opener for a humanity that has long confused comparison with progress and rivalry with growth. Introduction. Humanity's habit of comparison. Comparison has become one of humanity's most habitual inner movements. From early childhood, individuals are measured, ranked, and evaluated. Education systems, workplaces, families, and social platforms reinforce the idea that worth is relative and success is competitive. Yet comparison is not a neutral act. Each time a human being measures himself against another, he turns his gaze away from his own path and toward an external standard. This habit weakens inner independence and replaces recognition with judgment. Over time, comparison becomes automatic, shaping perception before conscious thought intervenes. The Grail Message reveals that each human being stands within a unique position in creation, shaped by individual responsibility, ability, and destiny. Comparison ignores this lawful individuality and replaces it with artificial standards, laying the foundation for envy. Envy hidden behind desire, ambition, and motivation. Envy often hides behind respectable names. It appears as ambition, disguises itself as desire for improvement, or claims to be motivation inspired by others' success. While desire and ambition are not inherently wrong, envy enters when the success or possession of another becomes a source of inner disturbance rather than inspiration. The critical distinction lies in inner movement. Healthy ambition focuses on development, envy focuses on comparison. Where ambition asks, "What can I unfold?" envy asks, "Why do they have what I do not?" This shift may be subtle, but its effects are profound. Many live driven by restless striving, believing they are motivated, while inwardly they are consumed by comparison. The Grail Message clarifies that true growth arises from alignment with one's own path, not from measuring oneself against others. Why emotional suppression has failed. Modern approaches to envy often emphasize suppression. Ignore it, deny it, or cover it with positive thinking. While such strategies may temporarily mask discomfort, they do not resolve the underlying disorder. Suppressed envy does not disappear, it sinks deeper, emerging later as bitterness, cynicism, or quiet hostility. Suppression fails because it treats envy as an emotion to be controlled rather than a condition to be understood. Without recognition of cause, correction is impossible. The Grail Message teaches that emotions are not enemies to be crushed, but signals pointing toward inner states that require honest examination. True release comes not through denial, but through clarity. When envy is seen clearly, without self-justification or condemnation, its grip loosens naturally. Recognition dissolves what force cannot. The Grail Message is the key to true understanding. The Grail Message offers a framework that transcends moral labeling and emotional struggle. It directs attention to the laws of creation, within which every thought, feeling, and action produces lawful effects. Envy is revealed not as a personal failure, but as a misalignment with these laws. By understanding envy in the light of law, the seeker is freed from self-accusation and social judgment. Responsibility replaces guilt, and clarity replaces confusion. The individual learns to observe inner movements soberly, recognizing causes and correcting them before they harden into destiny. This introduction sets the foundation for a journey of recognition. What follows is not theory, but a call to honest self-observation and lawful living. Only through such sobriety can envy lose its power and inner freedom be restored. Part 1. Human Misconceptions of Envy. Chapter 1. What humanity calls envy. Humanity often mislabels its inner experiences. Desire, admiration, and envy are commonly confused, yet each has a distinct nature. Desire is the simple recognition of what one lacks or wishes to unfold. Admiration is the recognition of qualities in another without inner disturbance. Envy, however, arises when recognition of another's possession or success triggers inner resistance, comparison, and disquiet. Many believe that to want what another has is already envy. This is a misconception. Desire, even strong desire, is a natural movement toward growth and development. It becomes envy only when it carries judgment, comparison, or resentment. The human mind, however, often interprets emotional intensity as envy, leading to self-condemnation or social labeling that is inaccurate. Emotional confusion is further compounded by social and cultural reinforcement. Children and adults alike are taught to feel competitive, to measure themselves against others, and to interpret another's success as a threat. As a result, inner states that are merely reactions to opportunity or inspiration are misread as moral or spiritual failure. The Grail Message emphasizes clarity. Understanding the precise nature of inner movements allows recognition to replace confusion. Envy is not the mere acknowledgement of difference, it is the inner disturbance that arises when one resists lawful reality and measures oneself against another. Chapter 2. Envy as motivation. A common human misconception is that envy is healthy because it supposedly motivates improvement. Society often praises competition and rivalry, suggesting that comparing oneself to others drives ambition. Yet this belief ignores the inner consequences of envy. Envy, when disguised as motivation, shifts the focus outward rather than inward. It asks, why do they have what I do not? Instead of, what can I develop within myself? It transforms a neutral opportunity for growth into a source of inner resistance and comparison. Even if external success follows, the inner disorder remains, hidden beneath accomplishments. The danger is amplified by social approval. Institutions, workplaces, and communities reward visible competition, creating the illusion that rivalry and envy are effective teachers. Individuals begin to equate comparison with learning, forgetting that true inner development arises from sober self-observation, honest recognition of law, and alignment with one's own abilities and destiny. The Grail Message clarifies that motivation derived from envy is temporary and misaligned. True progress occurs not through resentment or comparison but through recognition of lawful principles, conscious effort, and alignment with inner guidance. Envy used as motivation strengthens no one, it merely reinforces inner disturbance. Chapter 3. Envy as proof of injustice. Many humans interpret envy as evidence that life is unfair. When another experiences success, recognition, or possession that one desires, the mind immediately generates accusation. Why them and not me? This inner reasoning transforms envy into a judgment against life, fate, or even God. Such misjudgment is not only inaccurate but also dangerous, as it perpetuates inner conflict and resentment. This misconception relies on measuring value and worth externally. Rather than observing the lawful unfolding of each individual's path, humans impose artificial standards: wealth, status, appearance, or recognition. When these measurements do not align with personal desire, envy and accusation arise. Yet the laws of creation are impartial. What appears as injustice is often the lawful consequence of past causes and inner alignment, unknown to the observer. The Grail Message illuminates this error. Envy as proof of injustice is a misperception born from lack of recognition. By observing the lawful operation of cause and effect, and by turning attention inward to self-responsibility, the individual ceases to measure through comparison. Resentment fades, and a sober awareness emerges, allowing lawful understanding to replace emotional accusation. Summary of Part 1 Insights. Desire and admiration are often misidentified as envy. True envy is an inner disturbance against lawful reality. Envy as motivation misdirects effort outward, strengthening inner resistance rather than guiding lawful growth. Interpreting envy as proof of injustice fosters accusation and resentment. Recognition of law dissolves this misconception. Part 2. What envy really is. Chapter 4. Envy is inner resistance. True envy is not simply a reaction to another's success or possession, it is a reflection of inner resistance. At its core, envy arises when a human refuses to accept their own lawful position in the unfolding of life. This refusal manifests as restlessness, judgment, or inward bitterness whenever the success or happiness of another is perceived. Envy is fundamentally a misalignment. It is not caused by the circumstance or the presence of what another has achieved. It is caused by the refusal to recognize the lawful diversity of paths within creation. Every individual is unfolding according to their own unique combination of causes and inner alignment. Envy attempts to collapse this individuality into a comparison, resisting the lawful order of creation. The Grail Message clarifies that when one perceives another's achievements or qualities with jealousy, the root cause lies not outside, but within the inner resistance. By observing this resistance without judgment, the seeker begins to release envy, recognizing that alignment with one's own lawful path, rather than opposition to another's, is the key to inner freedom and clarity. Chapter 5. Comparison is the root. Comparison is the mechanism through which envy operates. When a human mind measures itself against another, it introduces false standards of value. What another has, whether skill, wealth, recognition, or talent, is treated as a benchmark for personal worth. This comparison replaces sober recognition of law with judgment, and inner discontent emerges. The act of measuring against another is subtle, often unconscious. It can appear as ambition, desire, or even admiration, but when inner resistance or dissatisfaction arises, envy is present. This is why the Grail message emphasizes distinguishing recognition from judgment. Recognition sees the uniqueness of each path without distortion, while judgment imposes a false hierarchy of value. Through careful self-observation, one can identify these comparative thoughts as the root of envy. Instead of letting comparison dictate inner state, the seeker learns to focus on personal alignment, understanding that growth and development are internal matters, not contests with others. Chapter 6. Envy and the Laws of Creation. The laws of creation operate impartially, without favoritism or bias. Every life unfolds according to cause and effect, reflecting the lawful individuality of each path. When a person experiences envy, it is a signal that they are perceiving reality through distorted judgment, failing to see that another's gain is never one's loss. Each individual receives in accordance with their own alignment and inner development. Envy blinds humans to the impartial working of these laws. It creates the illusion that success is scarce, that recognition or resources must be competed for, and that the happiness of one diminishes the other. The Grail message corrects this misconception. The universe is abundant, and lawful consequences flow independently of personal desire or judgment. By turning attention inward, observing one's reactions, and recognizing the lawful structure of life, the seeker begins to release envy. True understanding arises when one sees that alignment with law, not comparison or resistance, shapes experience. Envy diminishes as recognition of lawful individuality replaces judgment, leading to clarity, inner freedom, and harmonious interaction with life. Summary of Part 2 Insights. Envy arises from inner resistance, not from external circumstance or the presence of others' success. Comparison is the mechanism that fosters envy. False standards replace recognition with judgment. The laws of creation operate impartially, another's gain is never a personal loss. Recognition of lawful individuality and self-alignment dissolves envy and restores inner freedom. Part 3. Envy and Cause and Effect. Chapter 7. How Envy Creates New Causes. Envy is not a passive feeling, it is a creative force that shapes future experience. Every inner state, whether conscious or hidden, generates causes that manifest in life. When envy arises, the mind and soul generate subtle energetic patterns of comparison, resistance, and dissatisfaction. These patterns act as seeds for future experiences aligned with the state of envy itself. Thought and feeling are not neutral, they are lawful instruments of creation. By repeatedly engaging in envy, a person programs themselves to encounter circumstances that reinforce dissatisfaction. The law does not punish, it merely reflects the inner state back to the individual. Repetition occurs because the inner state of envy remains unresolved. Lawful consequences echo the unresolved resistance until recognition and correction occur. The Grail message teaches that awareness of these inner dynamics is the first step toward liberation. By observing the arising of envy without judgment, the seeker prevents the formation of new causes and begins to redirect inner forces toward constructive alignment with law, rather than allowing repetition of discontent. Chapter 8. The Consequences of Envy. Envy leaves a visible imprint on the human being. Its consequences are both subtle and profound. Inner restlessness. The mind becomes turbulent, thoughts racing with comparison and dissatisfaction. This unrest blocks clear perception and interrupts inner peace. Blocked development. Focused on another's path, the individual neglects their own lawful growth. Skills, talents, and opportunities remain dormant because energy is misdirected toward rivalry rather than alignment. Strained relationships. Hidden comparison undermines trust, communication, and collaboration. Even without overt hostility, envy creates distance and subtle conflict, as one's inner discontent affects interactions. The Grail message illuminates that these consequences are not punishment, but reflections of the inner state. By recognizing envy as the cause, humans can reclaim sovereignty over their lives, preventing ongoing disturbance and redirecting their energy toward law-aligned action. Chapter 9. Suffering versus Envy. Suffering and envy are often confused, but the Grail message distinguishes them clearly. Suffering arises from lawful consequences, offering instruction and growth. It is neutral, unfolding in alignment with cause and effect. Pain signals a misalignment or error, providing an opportunity for conscious correction. Envy converts suffering into self-prolonged disturbance. Instead of receiving instruction, the individual clings to dissatisfaction, blaming others or circumstances. This prolongs inner disturbance and delays growth, creating a loop of repeated experiences that could have been avoided. Envy interferes with the natural working of law. Where suffering offers a corrective mirror, envy twists the reflection into accusation, comparison, and resistance. The Grail Message clarifies that release from envy requires recognition of lawful consequence, humility before reality, and conscious alignment. Growth then resumes naturally, and the individual can transform potential stagnation into opportunity. Summary of Part 3 Insights. Envy creates causes through inner thought and feeling, influencing future experience. The consequences of envy manifest as restlessness, blocked development, and strained relationships. Envy prolongs suffering by resisting lawful instruction, whereas recognition restores inner clarity and growth. Awareness and conscious alignment break the cycle of repeated negative experience. Part 4. How Envy Distorts the Human Being. Chapter 10. Distortion of Perception. Envy fundamentally alters how a person perceives reality. When the inner state is dominated by comparison and desire for what another possesses, all experiences are filtered through this distorted lens. The Grail Message illuminates that the human being begins to see life not as it is, but as it relates to others, judging their own value in relation to someone else's achievements, possessions, or recognition. This comparative perspective breeds suspicion, bitterness, and inner narrowing. One begins to anticipate loss, imagine threats, or assume malevolent intent where none exists. Subtle judgments cloud clarity, trust diminishes, and even neutral events are interpreted as challenges or inequities. The inner world shrinks, as the individual is preoccupied with perceived deficits rather than seeing the broader lawful order of creation. Recognition of the lawful nature of life and alignment with one's own path is the antidote. Only when the human being steps out of comparison and observes events with sober awareness can perception regain its true clarity, uncolored by envy or resentment. Chapter 11. Effects on Thought, Word, and Deed. The distortions of perception inevitably manifest in external behavior. Envy is not contained internally, it subtly or overtly shapes thought, word, and deed. Thought. Mental patterns are dominated by judgment, desire for advantage, or resentment toward perceived rivals. The mind is restless, never satisfied, and preoccupied with the lives of others. Word. Speech may take the form of gossip, criticism, or subtle undermining. Even polite conversation can carry hidden disapproval or comparison. Words become tools of envy rather than instruments of truth. Deed. Actions may include withdrawal from collaboration, covert sabotage, overcompensation, or attempts to diminish others' success. Life becomes a series of reactive measures driven by inner disharmony rather than conscious alignment with law. The Grail Message clarifies that envy shapes behavior indirectly. It is not the act itself, but the inner state behind it that sets the pattern. By observing these patterns and correcting at the source, within thought and feeling, the outer consequences are naturally resolved. Chapter 12. Envy and Spiritual Blindness. Envy carries a spiritual consequence that is often overlooked: blindness to higher awareness. The Grail Message teaches that inner recognition and guidance arise when the soul is free from inner resistance. Envy creates a barrier. Recognition becomes impossible. The inner voice of conscience, the subtle awareness of law, is drowned out by preoccupation with comparison and judgment. Loss of inner guidance. Decisions are based on desire or rivalry rather than sober observation and alignment with law. Direction is sought in the external, not the internal, and life becomes reactive rather than purposeful. Separation from higher awareness. Envy disconnects the individual from the universal order and the continuous working of law, making it appear as though life is unfair or random, rather than orderly and lawful. The Grail Message emphasizes that spiritual clarity is restored when envy is recognized, acknowledged, and released. The human being can then perceive law in action, regain inner guidance, and participate consciously in the lawful unfolding of life. Summary of Part 4 Insights. Envy distorts perception, leading to suspicion, bitterness, and narrowed inner vision. Thought, word, and deed are influenced, often producing gossip, criticism, withdrawal, or sabotage. Spiritual and inner guidance is blocked, resulting in separation from higher awareness and law. Awareness, self-observation, and release of envy are essential for restoring clarity, alignment, and inner sovereignty. Part 5. Envy in Relationships. Chapter 13. Envy toward others. Envy toward others arises when the human being perceives another's success, possessions, recognition, or personal qualities as a threat to one's own value or position. The Grail Message clarifies that such envy is not a mere emotion, it is an inner state of disharmony that distorts both perception and interaction. This form of envy is particularly destructive in friends, colleagues, and family, where mutual cooperation and support should prevail. When envy exists, relationships harden, trust diminishes, communication becomes guarded, and subtle or overt competition replaces collaboration. The inner focus shifts outward, constantly measuring self against others, and the soul loses the capacity to recognize law and lawful unfolding in the lives of others. The antidote lies in conscious recognition, understanding that another's success does not diminish one's own potential, and that life operates through lawful principles that accommodate diversity. Through awareness and humility, one can observe without judgment, releasing rivalry in favor of mutual growth. Chapter 14. Envy toward self. Envy is not only projected outward, it can turn inward, manifesting as self-criticism, inferiority, regret, and self-reproach. The Grail Message illuminates this as a subtle form of self-rejection. Living in, if only, the mind repeatedly compares present reality to imagined possibilities, dwelling on what could have been or what should have been. Hidden self-rejection. The individual judges their own life as inadequate compared to others, creating dissatisfaction and internal rigidity. Envy toward self blocks recognition of law. The individual fails to see that their experiences, strengths, and path are part of a lawful unfolding. Spiritual clarity is dulled, and inner guidance is obscured. To overcome this, one must practice honest self-recognition, embracing one's own abilities and limitations without comparison or judgment. By observing and correcting internal resentment, the path toward self-alignment and inner freedom is opened. Chapter 15. Collective and Generational Envy. Envy is often transmitted through family patterns, cultural narratives, and societal structures. The Grail Message highlights how human groups can unconsciously adopt and perpetuate envy across generations. Family patterns and cultural rivalries. Children absorb unspoken resentments, rivalries, and expectations, creating latent envy that shapes behavior and perception. Group identity and shared resentment. Envy can solidify collective identity, where we define themselves in opposition to others, fostering competition rather than cooperation. These inherited or collective forms of envy are powerful because they operate below conscious awareness. Individuals may feel discontent or rivalry without realizing the root cause lies in repeated patterns from past generations. The Grail Message teaches that breaking these cycles requires conscious recognition, self-observation, and intentional alignment with law, rather than uncritical acceptance of inherited resentment. Through awareness, the individual not only releases personal envy but also prevents perpetuating it within communities. Summary of Part 5 Insights. Envy toward others hardens relationships and replaces cooperation with rivalry. Envy toward self blocks inner recognition and fosters regret, inferiority, and self-rejection. Collective and generational envy perpetuates resentment across groups, creating unconscious cycles of rivalry. Conscious observation, recognition of law, and humility are essential to release envy and restore harmony in personal and social spheres. Part 6. Why Envy Persists. Chapter 16. Fear of Lack. Envy often persists because of a deep-seated fear of lack, a fear that one is missing out, being left behind, or that life is unfairly distributing success, recognition, or resources. The Grail Message clarifies that this fear is not the law speaking, but the human mind reacting in disharmony with law. When the soul believes it is deficient or deprived, comparison becomes a survival mechanism. Thoughts revolve around what others have, and the heart resists acknowledging the lawful unfolding of one's own path. Fear of lack distorts perception, making lawful development appear delayed or denied. The antidote lies in recognition of one's own lawful place, understanding that life's law provides each being with experiences suitable for their development. The moment the individual perceives lawfully, the fear dissolves, and envy no longer finds fertile ground. Awareness replaces scarcity thinking with inner certainty and calm trust in life's structure. Chapter 17. Pride and Refusal to Learn. A second reason envy persists is pride and refusal to learn from experience. The inner voice says, "I deserve more, others are favored unfairly," hiding pride under the guise of moral or intellectual superiority. This form of envy is subtle. It convinces the individual that comparison is justified, and that their resentment is a mark of righteousness. Yet, the Grail Message highlights that pride blinds recognition of law and lawfulness. True understanding requires humility, the courage to see one's own motives and limitations clearly, and willingness to align with the impartial working of law. Without humility, the individual remains trapped in self-justified rivalry, missing the opportunity to turn experience into inner growth. Recognition of law and its impartiality is the only corrective measure. Chapter 18. Attachment to Outcomes. The third sustaining factor of envy is attachment to specific outcomes, whether status, recognition, possessions, or personal desires. The human mind clings to imagined or expected results, making any deviation appear as loss or unfairness. This attachment transforms desire into inner bondage, a rigid fixation on what should be, instead of what is. Envy arises when the present reality conflicts with these attachments. The Grail Message clarifies that detachment is necessary to release envy, but detachment does not mean indifference. It means aligning with law, accepting consequences, and using experiences as tools for growth, rather than as measures for judgment. Through conscious detachment, one learns to observe without reacting, allowing envy to dissolve and inner freedom to emerge. Life becomes a teacher rather than a source of comparison and grievance. Summary of Part 6 Insights. Fear of lack fuels envy by creating perceived deficiency and insecurity. Pride and refusal to learn perpetuate envy by justifying comparison and resisting recognition of law. Attachment to outcomes transforms desire into rigid inner bondage, prolonging inner disharmony. The Grail Message provides a way out. Humility, conscious recognition, and lawful alignment dissolve the roots of persistent envy. Part 7. The Grail Message Way Out. Chapter 19. Recognition over emotion. Envy arises primarily from emotional reaction, a feeling of lack, threat, or inadequacy stirred by observing the success, possessions, or achievements of others. The Grail Message clarifies that emotion alone cannot guide true human development. It is the inner recognition of law that illuminates reality. To move beyond envy, one must see the law at work behind every event, replacing the question, "Why me?" with, "What is the law showing me through this experience?" Recognition over emotion means discerning the cause and effect principle governing life, instead of reacting to appearances or comparing oneself with others. This shift requires inner sobriety and detachment, allowing one to observe life objectively. When recognition replaces reaction, envy loses its power, and insight emerges. The individual begins to understand that another's gain is not a loss, that all life unfolds according to the impartial law, and that personal growth is fostered not by resentment but by alignment with law. Chapter 20. Withdrawing comparison. Comparison is the primary fuel of envy. It measures self-worth against external standards, creating inner conflict and disharmony. The Grail Message teaches that true sovereignty is reclaimed when attention turns inward, toward development rather than measurement. Withdrawing comparison involves consciously observing the inner tendency to measure, compete, or resent, and redirecting energy towards self-improvement, skill, and moral clarity. This is not indifference to others, but a shift from rivalry to recognition, from judgment to observation. By focusing on personal alignment with law and conscious development, envy is replaced with understanding and appreciation. Relationships transform, competition softens, and life becomes a series of opportunities for growth rather than a theater of comparison. True inner freedom is found when one stops defining oneself through the lens of others. Chapter 21. Acceptance and Alignment. Acceptance is the culmination of overcoming envy. It is not passive resignation, but clear-sighted cooperation with the laws of creation. The Grail Message emphasizes that peace arises when one acknowledges life exactly as it is, including successes, failures, and divergences from expectation. Alignment follows acceptance. Thoughts, words, and deeds are brought into harmony with the law. This ensures that personal actions create constructive causes, instead of perpetuating envy, blame, or resistance. The soul becomes flexible, sober, and responsive, able to act in accordance with law rather than emotional impulse. Through acceptance and alignment, the individual experiences inner freedom, clarity, and trust in life's impartial order. Envy dissolves because the heart no longer clings to imagined deprivation, it rests in recognition of law, understanding that all experiences are opportunities for growth and true self-development. Summary of Part 7 Insights. Recognition over emotion transforms reaction into insight. Withdrawing comparison restores inner sovereignty and directs energy toward growth. Acceptance and alignment bring peace, clarity, and lawful cooperation. The Grail Message offers a practical roadmap. Observation, inner focus, and lawful recognition dissolve envy and restore freedom. Part 8. Inner Healing and Real Freedom. Chapter 22. Responsibility is Liberation. Envy thrives where responsibility is denied. Humanity often blames others, circumstances, or fate for perceived deficiencies, creating inner stagnation and frustration. The Grail Message illuminates that true freedom begins with taking responsibility for one's inner state. Responsibility means ending inner accusation, stopping the habitual blaming of others for our feelings, status, or outcomes. By recognizing that every thought, word, and action creates causes, the individual reclaims creative authority over their own life. This does not mean control over others, but mastery over one's own response to law. Taking responsibility dissolves the illusion of victimhood. Envy diminishes naturally because the mind ceases to measure, compare, or resent. Instead, one observes, learns, and acts in harmony with law, allowing inner liberation to unfold. Responsibility is the antidote to bitterness, jealousy, and envy. It is the doorway to conscious, free living. Chapter 23. Humility and Inner Expansion. Humility is a powerful tool for overcoming envy, though it is often misunderstood as weakness. True humility, as taught in the Grail Message, is awareness of one's place in creation, a sober recognition of personal limitations and potential. Humility softens rigid pride and dissolves comparative thinking. It fosters openness to learning and receptivity to insight, both from life events and the guidance of law. By letting go of ego-driven judgment and cultivating internal flexibility, one allows inner expansion. The soul grows free from confinement created by envy. Through humility, the heart becomes capable of recognition instead of reaction, allowing gratitude, understanding, and constructive action to replace resentment. Inner life becomes harmonious, clear, and responsive to law, rather than dominated by constrictive comparison. Chapter 24. Gratitude and Forward Orientation. Gratitude shifts attention away from what is lacking toward what is present, restoring balance and inner peace. When combined with recognition of law, gratitude allows one to turn fully toward their own path, releasing fixation on others' successes or possessions. Forward orientation is essential for healing from envy. Life is understood as a continual unfolding governed by law. By directing energy toward personal development, constructive creation, and service, the future opens in alignment with one's own potential. This practice regains the freedom lost to envy, transforming the individual from a passive reactor into an active participant in life. Gratitude and forward orientation create a dynamic interplay of recognition, growth, and inner freedom, completing the cycle of healing initiated by responsibility and humility. Summary of Part 8 Insights. Responsibility is liberation from inner accusation, reclaiming authority over one's own state. Humility allows softening, learning, and inner expansion, dissolving comparative thinking. Gratitude and forward orientation open the future and restore life, replacing envy with recognition. The Grail Message offers a practical pathway to real freedom, responsibility, humility, and gratitude. Part 9. Living Free from Envy. Chapter 25. Daily Self-Observation. Envy often arises unnoticed, in subtle forms, influencing thoughts and feelings before it manifests in speech or action. The Grail Message emphasizes daily self-observation as the key to freedom. By catching envy early, one prevents it from shaping inner life and interactions with others. Inner cleanliness begins with awareness, observing when comparisons arise, when desire for what others possess emerges, or when feelings of inadequacy surface. Recognition of these impulses without judgment is essential. Condemnation only strengthens attachment. Thought discipline is the practical tool, consciously redirecting attention from others' paths to one's own, asking, "What is mine to do here?" rather than, "Why does another have more?" Through this vigilance, envy is transformed into insight, and inner clarity is maintained, allowing responses to life to flow in alignment with law rather than reaction. Chapter 26. Relationships renewed. Envy distorts relationships, creating hidden rivalry, distrust, or silent resentment. Freedom from envy restores the natural harmony of interaction. Clear boundaries are vital. They protect personal space while respecting others' paths, removing the need for competition. Truthful interaction replaces covert comparison. Speaking, listening, and acting from recognition rather than judgment fosters mutual respect and understanding. Cooperation becomes possible because the mind no longer measures, compares, or resents. By observing the principles of law in relationships, one cultivates an environment where support, guidance, and shared growth replace envy, allowing both self and others to flourish. Relationships become reflections of inner clarity rather than mirrors of insecurity. Chapter 27. Destiny without envy. When envy is released, life transforms. The inner field is no longer constricted by comparison, and freedom of movement emerges. Decisions are made based on law and recognition, not fear or rivalry. Envy's absence allows for honest evaluation of opportunity and capability, shaping destiny through conscious choice rather than reaction. Life unfolds naturally according to individual alignment with law, creating a flow of circumstances suited to personal growth. Walking forward unburdened means engaging fully with one's own path, embracing challenges as lessons, and recognizing successes as lawful rewards rather than measures against others. Destiny, when freed from envy, becomes a cooperative interplay with law, producing harmony, insight, and realized potential. Summary of Part 9. Insights. Daily self-observation prevents envy from taking root, maintaining inner cleanliness and thought discipline. Relationships renewed through boundaries, truthful interaction, and cooperation instead of comparison. Destiny without envy enables freedom, alignment with law, and a life lived unburdened. The Grail Message teaches that conscious vigilance, recognition, and alignment are the keys to living free from envy. Part 10. Envy is a test of maturity. Chapter 28. Why life allows comparison. Life presents comparison not as punishment but as a teacher of insight. Experiences in which one perceives another's success, possessions, or recognition create opportunities for self-examination. Comparison reveals the state of one's inner alignment with law, whether pride, insecurity, or attachment dominates, and whether recognition or judgment guides thought. When approached consciously, these situations strengthen inner awareness without hardening the heart. The Grail Message emphasizes that envy's appearance is a reflection of inner resistance. By observing these impulses, understanding their origin, and letting them pass, the soul gains clarity and insight, turning life's comparisons into steps of maturity rather than sources of bitterness. Chapter 29. Those who refuse to release envy. Envy, if clung to, leads to stagnation and repetition. The same resentments and inner conflicts recur until recognition is achieved. The law works impartially, regardless of human denial, producing experiences aligned with inner states. Refusal to release envy creates spiritual and emotional blind spots. Relationships remain strained, opportunities are misinterpreted, and lessons are prolonged. The Grail Message teaches that resistance to insight incurs unnecessary suffering, whereas surrender through recognition allows one to cooperate with law and receive growth naturally. Understanding this, one sees that the cost of resistance is not external punishment, but repeated limitation of personal freedom, inner peace, and development. Chapter 30. Standing free in inner clarity. True maturity is demonstrated in standing free within inner clarity. Quiet strength emerges when the soul no longer reacts to comparison or measures its worth against another. Peace arises naturally when envy is replaced by recognition, humility, and acceptance of life's lawful structure. One trusts in the justice of the laws, that each path unfolds according to alignment, effort, and consequence. Standing free means acting without defense, embracing challenges without resentment, and moving through life with conscious awareness. It is the demonstration of inner sovereignty, where the soul participates in life's flow with understanding rather than reaction. Summary of Part 10 Insights. Comparison is a tool, not a trap, designed to reveal inner alignment and encourage insight. Resistance prolongs suffering, as the law works regardless of human denial. Standing free in inner clarity brings quiet strength, peace, and trust in the impartiality of law. The Grail Message teaches that maturity is measured by recognition, not reaction, and by the ability to transform envy into conscious growth. Conclusion. Envy is not inevitable. Humanity often perceives envy as a natural, unavoidable impulse. Yet, the Grail Message clarifies that envy arises not from circumstance but from inner resistance and misalignment. It is the soul's reaction to comparing itself with others rather than recognizing its own place in creation. When this is understood, it becomes clear that envy is a choice, reinforced by habit, fear, pride, and attachment. Freedom from envy is therefore entirely possible for anyone willing to observe, recognize, and correct their inner states. Recognition ends what time cannot. Time alone does not dissolve envy. It only passes over unexamined feelings, allowing resentment to fester beneath the surface. True release comes through recognition of law, seeing how envy distorts perception, shapes behavior, and blocks growth. When recognition replaces emotional reaction, the inner bondage created by envy is lifted, and the soul gains clarity and sovereignty. Freedom through alignment with law. The Grail Message teaches that freedom is the fruit of alignment with the laws of creation. Envy dissolves when one aligns thought, word, and deed with truth, responsibility, and recognition. Such alignment allows the individual to experience life unburdened, acting consciously rather than reacting to perceived injustice or comparison. Freedom is thus not external. It arises from inner understanding and cooperation with the impartial laws governing existence. Epilogue. A final call to earnest seekers. Lay down the burden of comparison. Each comparison made, each judgment of others' success or possessions, adds weight to the soul. The Grail Message calls for laying down this burden, recognizing that it serves no purpose other than prolonging limitation and dissatisfaction. Releasing comparison is not denial, but a conscious return to inner alignment and truth. Choose growth over rivalry. Life presents countless opportunities to measure oneself against others, but maturity lies in choosing growth instead of rivalry. Every experience that might provoke envy can instead become a mirror of inner states, guiding the seeker toward reflection, humility, and conscious development. Walk forward in sobriety, clarity, and inner freedom. True liberation manifests as sobriety in thought, clarity in perception, and freedom from inner disturbance. Walking forward requires continual awareness, self-observation, and willingness to release reactive patterns. The soul that moves in this manner participates fully in life, guided by law and inner recognition. Living consciously within the laws of creation. Ultimately, the Grail Message illuminates that envy is an obstacle only to the unobservant. Conscious living, understanding cause and effect, aligning with truth, and cultivating recognition, ensures that envy no longer dictates life. By living consciously within the laws of creation, the seeker experiences harmony, inner strength, and a liberated path, walking with clarity and the serenity of the soul fully awake. Key takeaways for the seeker. Envy arises from misalignment, not external circumstance. Recognition and self-observation are essential tools for inner liberation. Alignment with law transforms reactive comparison into conscious growth. Freedom, clarity, and peace are the natural rewards of inner recognition. True maturity is measured not by outward achievement, but by inner sovereignty and sobriety.